You have the golden ratio, of course.
Of course.
You should Google. There's a thing called the golden ratio. It has been invented a long time ago, and similar to an aspect ratio. You have 16:9.
Yeah. Welcome to the next episode of Going Indie, the podcast that dives deep into the world of independent creators and developers. In this episode, we'll sit down with Hidde van Ploeg. He's been an indie developer since 2021 and the creator behind several successful apps like Gola, NowPlaying, and most recently Helm, a native App Store Connect client. I'm incredibly excited to talk with Hidde since he's originally a designer and taught himself to code. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to this interview.
Indie dev. Now you get rich while being on the beach.
Welcome, Hidde.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Hidde van Ploeg.
Van Ploeg, yeah.
I'm probably the only interviewer that can pronounce it correctly.
It is a tough one. For sure. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Good. It's summer. It's good. Life is good.
In between festivals is what
I understood.
In between
festivals, going on the boats.
1 week later, and it would be hello, Hidde.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we know each other.
Yeah.
Makes it much easier for me, but we have pretty well listeners here that don't know you probably.
Yeah.
Can you give a short introduction who you are?
Sure. Well, my name is Hidde. It's like hidden without the N. Is how I always explain it to people that are non-Dutch. I'm originally from a small town called Leeuwarden up north in the Netherlands. And I've been designing apps for, I think, 15 years now, 16 years. And then ever since I got fascinated by apps and worked my way to become an indie dev somehow.
Somehow, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well, that was the episode.
Thanks. No, yeah. I think my journey is is not the most usual journey for an indie developer, I think. Like I said, I used to work for an agency as a designer, doing a lot of different apps for both Android and iPhone and iPad.
Designing, right?
Designing, so visual design only.
You originated as a designer.
Yeah. Code scared me. I thought HTML was code, basically. Yeah. But I always found it so magical that when I made something and I would hand off the design to a developer, that like a few hours or a day later, I would get it running on a device and it was actually working and it did things. And I thought like, wow, at some point I want to be able to do that. And well, as creative mind, you always have ideas. Yeah. So you always make concepts. And as a designer, I think if there are any designers watching, every designer probably has 3 different files with ideas of things they want to build, but don't want to find a partner with, because it's hard to sell an idea, to make someone really enthusiastic about an idea if it's your own idea already. So at some point, I'm like, how hard can it be? I'll just learn how to code. I'll just do that on the side. It was a bit harder than anticipated, but I got there eventually.
Well, how did you do that? Like, how did you pick your language to write code in?
Oh, yeah.
And when did you start that coding journey?
I started with like a tutorial, an Objective-C tutorial to create a to-do list.
So was it in the Objective-C
times? It was Objective-C,
so
right?
This is quite a long time
Yeah. That was the first time I really gave it a shot.
Yeah.
And I tried some tutorials and I could recreate the tutorials. I even shipped an app somehow.
Okay.
In Objective-C.
Okay.
But when I needed to update something, I always got stuck because I could follow the tutorial, but I didn't really understand Objective-C still.
Yeah.
So I still had to ask a lot of my developer friends, like, hey, how would I do this?
Yeah.
And then I quite quickly gave up. And then Swift came around the corner, and Swift looked like something more legible, more human, and more easier to understand.
Yeah.
And of course, the experience with Objective-C helped, but that's where I really like, okay, now I'm going to create a new app. I'm going to follow some tutorials, but only to get certain things that I want to have done. So I think I made a really small app that focused on one API, because I figured if I know how to connect to one Apple's APIs, then I could easily transfer that knowledge to do more things and actually build an app. So kept it very small and focused, I think.
So basically the first app or apps that you built were basically a combination of several tutorials that you found on the web, and you combine those into...
It's like, oh, I want to present this in a modal. Like, okay, how do you present in a modal? Like, follow a tutorial on modals probably. And then step by step, it slowly became like a Frankenstein app of copy and paste. But it worked. And at some point you learn what works and why it works. And then, you'll refactor it later anyway if your knowledge grows.
So what was that first app that you released? Because that is quite a big milestone as a designer.
Yeah.
Getting your first thing out that you completely built yourself.
Yeah, officially the first one was a to-do list app, and it was just jotting down items, and it was a pull, instead of a pull to refresh, it had a pull to create new item.
Okay.
That was the biggest challenge.
Yeah, custom animation.
Mainly just to override the pull to refresh interaction.
Yeah.
But I thought it was like a really nice way to quickly jot down items, like for a grocery list or whatever.
Yeah.
But that one I deprecated really fast because it was an Objective-C and I didn't really understand how I did it. So then my first official baby, I would say.
Yeah.
It was a weight tracking app called Fact, and with that one I was just focusing on Health Kit, and Health Kit was just introduced, and adding weight to Health app was very cumbersome. So I was like, I'll just focus on adding weight really easily and quickly, and from there on it grew to adding WatchOS apps and widgets and whatever came along. I would just use that project to learn more about new things, basically.
Right. So you started with a really isolated
yeah.
problem. Which year are we talking about? This is 2017 or something?
I think this was the year the watch came out, actually. So that's almost 2013, I think.
Oh, that's
2014.
Okay, yeah, that's a long way back. Yeah. You already mentioned it, but I think many people that follow you know that you're a big watch fan, isn't it?
Yeah. I always liked the form factor of the watch. I've done some presentations about WatchOS, and the reason why I think WatchOS is very undervalued still by a lot of developers, because it really helps you become a better designer as well, because it really forces you to make an app do one thing really well, or maybe a few things, but at least per screen focus on doing one thing. Yeah. And that's where I see a lot of developers go wrong, in the sense of they put all features in one single screen. Well, it's a lot easier to digest if it's just focused on doing one thing. Yeah. And I think that's why I love the watch so much, because it forces you to do that, because it's so tiny. And with the iPhone and iPad especially, it's like you have so much screen space. It's like you can just put it everywhere, but it's not always the best thing to do.
No, yeah, you have a really small screen, and also the options in terms of designing the app are quite limited.
Yeah. So and that's good. Especially if you're not a designer by heart.
Yeah.
Then it's good to not be able to do everything sometimes.
But that's my point, right? Like, you have your own vision as a designer, and you kind of like get the tools that Apple gives you. And how do you still like fulfill your own itch in a way, right? Like,
but for me it worked the other way around, because I wanted to design everything like fancy and flashy. Yeah. Because of the limitations of the WatchOS, it forces me to keep it technically possible, and therefore it was easier for me to learn also like what's technically possible, and like respect the system components a bit more. Right. Because every developer that worked with the designer knows, especially if it's a junior designer, like often you get a design that's like nearly impossible to make, or it's gonna take like half a year to build. And I think it's a good practice from a design point of view to understand what technically is possible. So that's you need to find that middle ground, basically.
Have you always been like that as a designer when you started? You know, you come from a design background. You already had experience designing apps, right? So you knew kind of like the possibilities. But then you start building your own apps, and you suddenly have to, you can't just throw it to the developer. You suddenly have to deal with the challenges yourself. And did you face some like reality there for yourself? Like, oh, damn, okay.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think if you look at the first sketch file for my Fact app, the design was completely different than the first version that I launched. It was a lot of thin lines and custom keyboards, I think, even. Everything was custom. And as I implemented, like, it's still like the the layout was still similar to the original idea, but at least the styling was more respectful to the system, because it's like, I already have a problem like getting a navigation bar to work properly.
Yeah.
Never mind getting it be custom as well.
So basically, building your own apps made you a better designer.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, with all skills, it's the repetition that makes you better, right? They always say like it takes you 1,000 hours to learn a new skill. I think it is the first 1,000 hours to learn it, but then the next million or so to actually like, you always can become better at a certain skill. So the more you do it, and the more good. And now I'm more in the middle ground where I can develop quite fast and understand what's possible, but I also still like to challenge myself and see how I can push the barrier a bit.
Yeah, so you started as a designer and you became more interested in building stuff yourself, and eventually you made your first weight tracking app.
Yeah.
That was on the side from your...
That was on the side, 100%.
So you started kind of as a side project.
Yeah. As we all do.
as we all do. Well, I happen to make a course about going from a side project to going indie. So maybe can you take us a bit on that journey? Like how did you transform your side project into something that's now your main job?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, to begin with, this side project has always been about learning new things. So everything I built was, of course, to solve a problem, but also to learn something new. So I think, like I said, literally the second update, I added a WatchOS app because I wanted to learn. Like I shipped an iPhone app, now I wanted to know how to push that to WatchOS as well.
Yeah,
and then every update that I gave to that app was to learn a new skill, and with that the app grows, and with that you get, at some point you get, if you're lucky, get some publications writing about you. But I think the key thing here is that it will always take time, and I think what Jordi does really well is like he tries out a lot of things, and then some work, some don't, but that's the reality of it. You don't always know what's going to work. So
you're from the previous episode.
From the previous episode. Oh yeah, sorry. I think it's a really good practice to make learning the key aspect of what you do, because then it's fun, because you feel like you're growing in skill set, and as long as you're having fun, it doesn't feel like work, and as long as it doesn't feel like work, it's easy to do on the side. And over time, like all my apps has started out with a little experiment of, I want to learn this new API. And I think that works really well for me. It doesn't have to say that it works for everyone as well, but I think the key there is like learn something new. Yeah.
So you did that on the side.
Yeah, on the side.
You grow your weight tracking app.
Yeah.
Was the weight tracking app the reason that you could go indie, or
no, definitely not. I mean, it brought in some cash, but and it grew over time, of course. But eventually, I think it's accumulation of multiple apps that made me switch. And yeah, I think that's what I mean with, don't assume that your first app is gonna be a gold luck. And you'll switch within half a year or so. Just that's what I mean with try out new ideas. But if you have multiple apps, sometimes you don't even have to update it every month or so. Just if it's there, it will bring in some money. And accumulating, it will become more and more. And at some point, you feel confident enough.
And every app brings in not only money but also experience.
100%,
right? You get to know unknown ground, like you said, like you build a WatchOS app, so you know how to build a WatchOS app. Maybe sometimes you suddenly did an iPad app. You're not so much on Mac, I think, yet.
No, until recently, of course. Yeah, with Helm, that was my first macOS app. That was quite fun experience. Because it's quite different.
Helm is can you explain?
Helm is a native macOS app for App Store Connect. Because as an indie, you ship a lot of updates for a lot of different apps. So I was quite annoyed with how I had to log into App Store Connect every time, and I didn't like the other options that much. So I decided to work on a native Mac app for App Store Connect. It will introduce some AI features to make my life easier. And everyone's life easier that ships app, I hope.
Yeah. And this is an example of something recently where you still got to learn a new platform, even though you build apps for, since the Objective-C time. So that's like 100 years or something.
Yeah. I think this is honestly, I think Swift UI I get a lot of trouble for it. It's the build one, use everywhere. And that's not necessarily true as in like you can use everything.
Yeah.
But it is like, it didn't feel like a new skill to learn to build a macOS app, because I've built apps for all the other platforms in Swift UI. Yeah. So of course there's always limitations that you reach, and you always have to find solutions, but that's part of the job, to find solutions. And instead of an UI image, you use an NS image, but a lot of the things are like very similar.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful. And this is also really what I've been saying to other designers as well. Like, there's no better time to start building your side projects than today, because if you don't understand anything, you don't even have to find the right Stack Overflow thing anymore. You can ask tools like Claude or ChatGPT to help you out and learn by copy pasting.
Yeah, and I think tools like Figma now even integrate code.
Yeah.
And, I think if we compare Swift UI with Objective-C, where you started, it's night and day difference.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Yeah, and it even looks like Framer was a very popular tool for prototyping. Now they pivoted to a website tool, but it was super popular back in the day, and it was all CoffeeScript. Mm-hmm. So you wrote CoffeeScript, and then you saw a canvas on the right, which is very similar to what now Swift UI is with Swift UI Preview. Yeah. It literally looks the same. Yeah. The difference now is if you press build, it actually runs on your phone, and you could potentially ship it to the App Store. So it's...
Yeah. Do you think many designers are intimidated and think they can't build something themselves?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Knowing designers and knowing myself as a designer back in the days, I know we spend too much time thinking about the problems to solve and how to solve it. And then we think about the aesthetics and the feelings of a product, how we convey that. Yeah. And then everything that slightly looks technical can scare off quite a bit, because it doesn't feel like the tools that we're used to. It doesn't have a pen tool. It doesn't have a draw rectangle tool. It doesn't, especially draw rectangle is very popular, I guess. Okay. But it doesn't have like the styling and layers that you grew up as a designer. You're used to having layers and you work with that. Where in code, you somewhat have layers, but they don't look like layers as we used to. So I think that scares off most people.
Yeah. Yeah,
and then there's a whole performance thing, of course, as well.
What do you mean with that?
Right, like code should be performant in some way at some point if it gets too complicated.
Right. Yeah. You start to hit challenges and you need to overcome
hiccups
those
and stuff. Yeah.
But in a way, Swift UI is making it so easy to build apps, right? Like we just had a chat with the editor as well. He told me like I would love to be able to build apps. Well. In a way, it's basically just a decision of doing it rather than
100%.
The possibility, right? Like nowadays, the tools are so much better and so much.
Oh yeah, it's so easy. And I think a good example, especially if you get familiar with it, the good example is when I made the ChatGPT app for Apple Watch called PT. It blew up in popularity. But the fun thing is, I made the original app in like 20 minutes. Because I had some experience with the OpenAI API from another app. Yeah. And then I had a working prototype in 20 minutes, I think, maybe half an hour. Mm-hmm. And then I spent the rest of the day designing a little robot, because I wanted to make it look friendly and happy instead of technical.
The identity of the app.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So the design part still cost me more time than coding in this case.
Yeah. But that's fascinating, right? You can lose yourself in the design as well in a way, but the coding part is not so difficult, is what you're saying in a way.
It gets difficult at some point, of course, but
depending how far you go,
depending how crazy you get. Yeah. But the UI coding, most of the time, it's quite straightforward. Right. If you keep it simple.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Adapty, a revenue management platform for mobile apps with subscriptions. Adapty makes it easy to deploy, analyze, and optimize mobile subscriptions with just a few lines of code. Its no-code paywall builder allows you to quickly deliver native paywalls to customers. and advanced predictive analytics help project your future income with up to 90% accuracy. The Adapty SDK supports Swift, Kotlin, Flutter, React Native, and Unity, and is used by over 7,000 apps, including the world's largest subscription app publishers. Core Adapty features are available on a free plan, and SDK integration takes just 1 hour, even for a junior developer. Visit adapty.io and start scaling your app for free. Before we dive back into this episode, I want to quickly share something that could change your journey. If you're dreaming of turning your side project into fully independence, my Going Indie course is designed to guide you every step of the way. Visit goingindie.com and let's make your indie dreams a reality.
So you mentioned PD. We discovered Helm. You have a few more, Gola, NowPlaying.
Yeah.
At a certain point, there was a decision moment where you really made yourself fully independent. And I know you're still doing client work.
Every now and then, yeah.
Mostly for reasons, but not per se because you need it.
No.
When was that point where you really knew, like, okay, I'm now going to take the leap and fully focus on my own work?
I think when I was in my 9-to-5 job, the thing I realized, the thing I love doing most is building projects, building things. And the things that I like the least for clients. Yeah. But then, so at that point, I decided to go freelance and to balance things a bit more. So I would take on bigger projects that would give me a lot of runway. Yeah. And then take that project, finish with the project, and then burn that runway till it was like nearly burned down. Yeah. And then take on new projects and then basically balance the difference between freelance projects and my own apps more and more till I could fully stop doing client work.
Yeah, you're talking about income then.
Yeah,
right?
about income. Yeah, because that's the main reason why we're not all indies, right? Because we still need income and you need to have a source of income. Yeah. So I think in that regard, it really helped me because with the client work, it still forced me to do different type of styles because my client work was always design, of course. And then I could bring learnings over. I could also talk to other developers of clients because most of the time there were iOS apps anyway. Yeah. So I could even then talk with developers that were working at the client, like how would you do this to learn from a person, not only from tutorials. And then as soon as income was good enough on the product side of things, then I could, like I do now, I only do client work for clients that I really like, or for projects that I really like.
Yeah, you're in a luxury position.
Yeah, it's an optional. It's not a mandatory thing anymore.
But this is a nice segue, right? Like you're a designer, and you obviously have your personal style. If you know Hidde's apps, you know, like you can tell you have your own style, but it could also be a limitation in a way, right? Like if you constantly work on your own stuff, you don't necessarily get the inspiration that you would otherwise
100%
get from challenges at clients. Like, how do you keep yourself inspired and up to date with the latest trends?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if most designers will agree, it's really hard to step away from your own style because every designer has their own style. I have a couple of good friends, and I can easily tell who of my friends made it. And like a client work really helps you work in different brandings already because they often have already a style settled. So it really helps you push the boundary of working in your safe space. Yeah. But in the end, it's also okay to have your own style, right? As long as it feels like this is you're agree to this style, you love this style, you agree with how it looks, and this is how your apps look and feel. Yeah. Then you should just accept it, and not always try to be different for the sake of being different, because you're not good at that other style from the beginning. It's a learning curve. Like every style has a learning curve as well. And inspiration for me can come from anywhere. Like I of course look at other apps that I really like and think like, oh, this is a clever solution to that. Yeah. Or this is a clever visual identity that fits that app. Yeah. But in the end, what style fits with your app is really a feeling-based thing, and it's really hard to train. But if I would give one tip, is like, what is the target audience of this app, and what is it that you want the app to come across for? Like a good example, I think, with Gola is I tried to make it. Gola is quite different than NowPlaying. With NowPlaying is super visual and focused on the artwork and the music.
Yeah.
Where Gola, I really wanted to make it feel more personal because it's about your own goals that you're tracking, right? So it should feel very human and personal, and not as like a bank, very straight and serious.
Yeah.
So I tried to make it a bit more fun with every now and then some like more like hand-drawn things and scribbles here and there, just to get a feel for more organic and personal touch. And I think this is something that's really difficult to do, but like creating a mood board of like this is somewhat of the vibe that my app should have is a really good practice to do.
And so mood boards are also a great way for inspiration, right? Like you need to find sources, you need to build that idea that you have visually in a way.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a common misconception about mood boards is that they have to be, with app design, is that they have to be other apps or other UI. Please don't. Please also just add scenes from films or car designs or landscapes, even for colors, if you like. I always I collect a lot of source material, but a lot of it are also just random pictures of old posters or animals that I really think the colors are like really cool from. To go through, if I start a new project which need a new style, I just go through all those inspiration and then pick from there, and then like this is the vibe that I wanted to have a little bit.
And then how do you process that into like a UI then, right? Like
that's I think it's a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you think, oh, these colors would work amazing for this, and then you use it on a UI, especially with fonts.
So it's really the colors that you pick out.
Out of any resource.
I now see a picture of a tiger somewhere.
For example, a tiger has amazing orange tones to them, right?
Right.
So like an orange browny tones.
And do you literally pick colors?
Yeah, I pick a couple often because it's not always the first one. And like I said, I always test it on a device to see how does these colors feel like on the device. And if I think this works great, this is a strong color for this app.
Yeah.
Then first thing to do is make the standard accent color.
Right. The primary color.
The primary color, color. Because I think that's what Apple tries to force you to do as well. That's when you create a new project, you have like the one accent color that's by default blue.
Yeah.
Try to play with that and see which color fits your app the best. Like fits the vibe of your app best.
Yeah.
If you start with just that color, and then use like the secondary and the tertiary and the quinary ones,
the standard colors from Apple.
Well, those are based on your accent color. Then you already have a whole color palette, and it already makes it feel more like yours.
Yeah.
I mean, I think last year or 2 years ago, nowadays you use foreground style, for example, instead of foreground color.
Yeah.
And even then, if you do the accent color and you can whack a dot tertiary on, Apple will create the tertiary color for you. So you don't even have to pick another color to do that anymore.
Right. Yeah, those are like the Swift UI APIs that changed.
Yeah, exactly. Because even Apple noticed probably that it is really difficult to pick colors. And as long as if you start with one and you can make already a lot of variations based on that one, it's a lot easier already to make it feel similar.
Right. So to rewind a little bit back, right? Like inspiration. And do you still take clients on just for the sake of making sure you're still up to date or get more inspiration?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yes and no. Yeah, really depends on the client.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really to get myself out of the Hidde box.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just because I think it's a really cool product to work for.
Yeah.
But yeah, inspiration can literally come from anywhere.
Yeah,
So
true.
don't shut it off from just apps. It literally can come from everything you think looks cool.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know why it looks cool, just save it somewhere
Yeah.
in some folder or use an app to save it. And just save it somewhere so just you can reference to it, and then you can try to find out why do you think this looks cool, and what is it that makes it look cool.
Okay, so let's take this into an example, right? Like you just already gave us sort of like insight into how you pick your primary color. But say Hidde is building a new app for a certain hackathon and
Right.
needs to come up with a design.
Yeah.
How where do you start, and how does that process look like? Do you start by really picking that color, or do you start by building the app, or like?
Yeah,
Can you take us through the process?
Well, in my process, I always think an app, in a way, it starts with solving a problem, right? And a problem always fits a certain space.
Yeah.
And within that space, I always try to figure out what's the story of this space. Like, for example, if you have a banking app, that's a really easy example. The space is for you to get more grip on your financial picture or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you want things to be clear and very very straightforward, and not be too
less fancy.
Exactly. You just want to have clarity.
Yeah.
So in that case, the styling should emphasize the clarity and not try to make things fancy because of the sake of fanciness. However, if it's a more personal app, then you can see, okay, what makes something personal? Like I said before, with Gola, you add scribbles because I think almost nothing's more personal than a handwriting, right?
Yeah, more playful in a way.
Yeah, it's more playful because the default fonts are always already like round or whatever. But if you know someone really well, you recognize their handwriting. So having some form of of more of a writing style, a scriptal style, it already makes it more human because computers don't have a handwriting. Even though if it's a font, of course it is somewhat is.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling you have to make your own font because that's a whole nother course. But at least think about things like those little touches on how can I make things a bit more towards what I want to achieve with this app. And that can come from anywhere as well by looking around you like, okay, if I walk into a bank, it's also different than if I walk into a clothing store, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like there are just different feelings to it.
Yeah.
And you won't always hit that feeling straight away, but just keep trying till it feels right, basically. It's similar as what it is with code, I guess, is keep trying until things like,
But I try to pinpoint the process, right? Like we're talking about a new idea that solves one problem.
Yeah.
You are a designer that now knows how to code. Maybe there's a designer that wants to learn how to code.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty easy as a designer to lose yourself in the design process, right? Like making the whole design first before knowing even whether it's possible to build, whether users want this feature like how it is. Like, do you literally start with that whole almost like a design environment idea, or do you find yourself first building it with just gray colors, ugly, and then eventually putting a color on it?
I think this is really a personal preference, but I like to write a lot of things down, like brainstorm about the idea a bit, give myself some space, not always jump into code straight away, just really think about what am I trying to do here. And I these days I always design just in SwiftUI because I'm so familiar with SwiftUI, and I just get things to work first and then put this like nice sauce on top of it.
Right. Yeah.
Because as soon as you get stuff to work, then you also get the feel of how does this app actually feels like.
Yeah.
And it can be black and white and gray in the beginning, and that's fine, or just the default colors.
Yeah.
Just get to know your app really, in a way, because it sounds a bit silly, but in a way an app should have personality. And if I would first meet you right now, I would not know your personality straight away as well. I have to talk to you a bit more, and I have to maybe spend some time with you to get to know you. And it's similar for designing apps. You have to get to know the app before you feel like this works well for this and that doesn't.
Yeah, and when you build something, you can immediately try out colors and get
exactly.
feedback of
it's
how it
perfect.
feels, right?
Yeah.
And especially, I think for those that don't know how to design but do know how to code, this process works much better, right? Like you have a way of getting somewhere without losing yourself in a design platform which you probably have to learn as well, right?
Exactly, it's another software to learn, and plus it also it's already working, right? So you don't even have to build, and you only have to tweak UI or build UI around something that's already working instead of the other way around.
Yeah, the work that you do in the process of going towards the design is not lost work, right?
No.
Like you already make progress towards a real product. So in a way, it's a win-win.
Yeah, you might move it to somewhere else because the UX is not right, but at least you have the functionality there, and you can then also you can feel where should this functionality actually live.
Right. And when do you decide? You spoke about a custom pool to refresh. You know, that's in the early days. I think you just transitioned. And,
everything needs to be different.
But I know your apps are also quite fancy in terms of animations and stuff. Something that I can definitely learn from. But like, where is the point where you decide, like, okay, the app works, and now I want to make it shiny and lose myself for a few hours into just making it more beautiful?
For me, I always determine quite a clear like MVP, or this is the minimal thing that I want to achieve for, even if it's a new feature or a new app, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just decide what's the minimal thing that it should do, and if I have that working, then I go start polishing and do some style exploration, I guess. And then animations always come in a bit later, because animations really ties into how it feels.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to be snappy or bouncy, things like that. And then again, I also already start very early on by making sure I have some sort of a system in place, so that if I want to play with the style, that at least I have to just change it on one spot.
A design system.
Yeah. Well, design system is a bit of a buzzword, but I think it's at least to have some form of standardization of this is the brand color and this is the title font and stuff.
Right. That you have to change it in one place and your whole app gets that feeling.
Yeah, like corner radius, things like that. And make some shadows, basic shadows as well. In a way, it's a tiny design system because I guess it is. But I think I start with that quite early on because I know it will change, and at least I know if I change it, it will be consistent.
Yeah.
And I think consistency is super important to have a great design inside your app.
Yeah.
Because that again is how it feels, and consistency in how it feels is really important.
So and this is the style exploration as well, in a way, what you just mentioned.
Yes, 100%.
Right. And how does spacing play a role in this? Because I believe one of the, well, I'm a developer myself. I have a bit of a design background, so maybe I'm in an advantage there. But I know from the designs that I've seen from developers that struggle with a good design.
Yeah, so spacing.
Yeah, I mean, you can pick a color. That's not hard. You can pick a font that's default, right?
Yeah.
That's also doable. But I find spacing something more tangible, something more harder to do right.
I'd like to challenge that. I don't think it's always spacing. I think it's hierarcy that is the most problem. And spacing is a tool to create hierarchy, in a visual hierarchy. So what's important? What do you see first? And there's spacing is often one that's been forgotten the most, because it's a bit scary. Like, how much spacing do we need? I mean, even if you start with default paddings and stuff around things, it's already a great start. But there's also things like visual weight, right? Like if you can make if you have a title and a body text, for example, you can make the title bold, or you can make the title larger. You can make the title a different color. And those are already 3 different tools to make get different hierarchy in what do you read first.
Yeah.
And something I always strive for with every view, even if it's a tiny little view, is to write down what's the goal of this view and what's the most important of part of this view. And by knowing what's the goal and therefore what's the most important, it's a lot easier to tone down the other elements that do not add to this goal, or even remove them, because that's also a thing. We love putting everything in one thing, but sometimes removing one part of information or data, whatever,
less is more.
Is already working better than making it a lighter color or smaller font.
Right. So you really try to guide the user towards the goal of that page.
Yeah.
By almost like
I want to
creating a
use
focus
it
point.
if they look at something, they clearly know what they can do and what they can read, basically.
Right.
And I don't want the user to have the user to explore too much before be able to do anything.
Right. Right. So I'm a developer. I don't have a design background, and I created a page where I can fill in a new node. Right. Or maybe better, it's a form page or something. And so I have a text field and another text field, and
Another one,
I have a
another.
label in front of it and a button. Like how do I go from that standard, view which doesn't have any spacing and hierarchy in a way, or it has, but it doesn't work that way. How do we go from that into something that looks visually appealing and more attractive?
I think one of the most important things is like, how can I make it as clear as possible what needs to be filled in a form? Because a form is quite difficult. There's so many different of them.
Yeah.
But like sometimes an icon can help, but not always. For example, if you have a name field and a URL field, you don't have to have an icon in both, because that's different. You can create different visual hierarchy already by making it slightly different. So I could have a little link icon in the URL field, for example, and no icon in the name field, because the name is quite easy to understand. Everyone knows what the name is. Well, that's debatable. You can have first name, last name, but everyone knows what a name is.
Yeah.
But with a URL or website, it's already becomes a bit more technical. So if you add a little link icon, for example, it makes it already clear, like, oh, this is for this form to link to somewhere external.
Right.
And then already by adding that little icon in just that URL field, you make a visual difference and tell a different story in that form. And therefore makes it a bit more clear to what the user can expect to fill in.
Right. You really have kind of like a tool set as a designer. And
Yeah.
you try to apply these things, see how it looks.
Yeah, see
and
what works
adjust
best.
But so I also have a personal blog, and one thing I struggled with when I did like a CSS update is like there's a line height, there's paragraphs, there's the distance between the title and the paragraph, and you know, like I with development I can just search for a certain solution, but it's not that I can search on Google what spacing should I use between a title and a paragraph. Or
there are some golden rules in the goal. You have the golden ratio, of course. Of course. You can Google. There's a thing called the golden ratio. It's been invented a long time ago, and it's like similar to an aspect ratio. You have 16:9.
Yeah.
There's also a golden ratio. If you divide it by a certain number, it's almost like pi. It's a very long number.
Okay.
But if you divide the sizes between that, then it's always good in legibility wise. And there's, it's with like, it's not different than coding in a way. There's a lot of these small rules that if you learn them then and apply them everywhere, then it always looks okay. It doesn't have to be good necessarily, but at least it looks okay.
So you're now saying I just have a cheat sheet that I can follow, and it will look good in a way.
Yeah, I mean every new skill takes time to learn. So it's but you can Google some of these design skills as well. Just get to know those ratios is a starting point.
Yeah,
but it's not that I think, oh, the ratio is this and that's how it works. At some point, it's a feeling thing, and you get to train that feeling or train your eyes in a way.
Yeah,
and you know if it looks good or not. And
yeah, but this is the thing, right? Like you look at the design, you've been seeing that single page for 2 hours because you're building that feature, and then you start to adjust the spacing, and you're like, oh, this feels so off.
Yeah,
right. Like maybe I need to squeeze my eyes a little bit because it looks better, like come back the next day, or it's a lot of trial and error, but also building up a feeling of what looks good.
It's 100% training of your eyes, and that's why I think designers these days are in a. I might be a bit biased, but I think designers these days are a bit in a better position than developers, because I think it's a lot easier to learn how to develop today than to learn how to design, because design will always be training your eye a lot. And of course there's some theories, but it is still more of a training than coding. Well, coding is a lot more theory, and the theory changes, of course, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot of theory, but at least it's more digestible and easier to understand if you understand.
It's less opinionated.
It's less. Well, there's still a lot of opinions, but it's less of a feeling thing.
Yeah.
And feeling is very difficult.
Maybe it's the outcome is objective, while for design the outcome is subjective. Maybe.
Yeah, and even with design, there's always people with opinions. Like the rebrand of this is so ugly, and the other one thinks it's really pretty. So there was always, and therefore it's like, I think it's very famous quote for design is how it feels, not how it looks.
Yeah,
and that's 100% true. And it's just all feeling based, and that's very difficult to train. But the only way to do it is by just trying out things. And the way I started learning design is by copying designs that I really like. Just plain out copy it, and then learn how to copy, and then from there on understand why do I like this? Like, what if you make it yourself the way you like it, then you get to train that feeling, and from there on you develop an own style as well.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And I think it adds up to the consistency that you mentioned before. If we talk in the world of apps, copying other apps like system apps is what you do by just using system components, system fonts. Don't lose yourself too much in a custom animation and those kind of things, right? Like, would you recommend developers to just stick to the default and focus more on the app functionality rather than?
Yeah, I mean, if you can make the default look good, you're already a step ahead, I think. And of course, the components are set up to look quite good and at least fit in with the platform.
Yeah,
so
which is also important.
Which
right?
is very important. Yeah. So I think it's a good start, and then from there on, maybe indeed look at other apps that you really like, design-wise, or designs that you think would fit your app.
Yeah.
And don't just steal it in the sense of, I'm going to do the exact same thing, but in my app.
Yeah.
But feel free to recreate it and understand why you like it and understand how you created it, because then you learn new techniques of certain design styles, and maybe you can apply those techniques slightly different to your own app, and then it's still somewhat of a copy, but not necessarily, because you gave your own tweaks to it.
It's a new combination that creates your personal juice in a way.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I look at myself, using system components brings me really far, but it's only so far, right? You also want to create that personal touch that makes your app stand out, or that makes your app your app.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that final step is often the most difficult for non-designers, like going from something.
Oh, it's the most difficult for designers as well.
Yeah, right.
it's every project is different, and every project has a different feel to it, and then you're like, okay, what are we gonna do this time?
Yeah.
And in between, you see a lot of other styles and designs, and you like I said, I saved them. So I think still a good tip is like save things you love, like aesthetically.
Along the way.
Yeah, on the way. Always just
if you see something,
save them somewhere.
Where do you save them?
I use an app for it called Raindrop. I think I used to use a different app for it, but there's not a lot of. You can use, even if you just store them in a Pinterest for iCare.
Right, just have a process where you can
somewhere.
store something that inspires you at that moment.
Yeah,
that you don't lose track of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just save everything.
Yeah,
and copy.
Yeah, and then you will also create a place where you can get back to when you're lacking inspiration, right?
Yeah, yeah. That it's where I start all my projects.
Right,
at the mood board.
Yeah, I think you also used Dribble before, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think what I like to do sometimes is indeed create a collection on Dribble and just add, like I created the stocks app and I needed inspiration for a stock chart. So I just went and
search. And the fun thing is with Dribble, for example, a lot of those designs are not real apps, right? They're just concepts.
Yeah.
But they do convey some certain ideas of how you could tackle certain bits of information, and I think that's a really good source of inspiration. It's like every app has basically, an app is nothing more than showing data or doing X, whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of different ways to show that data.
Yeah.
So finding the right way to show that data, or most fun way to show the data, is part of the journey.
Yeah. You also have several apps. Do you copy paste designs in a way, or
between apps?
Well, I do recognize your design across the different apps that you have. So in a way, it feels like you did some copying there. But
sometimes a little bit, not too much. I tried, like I said before, I want every app to challenge me differently.
Yeah.
But there's always basic elements that I copy over. I don't have a Swift package for it or anything called Hidde UI or anything.
Would make me proud.
But I do that on purpose because I still like I still like my apps to feel slightly different, unless it's chosen not to. Like with a new app I'm working on now with a year timeline, I feel like it fits really well in line with my goal tracking app, because that's also your yearly goals.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to make that one feel like it's older brother or some way, or like at least be part of the family, and then maybe sell it as a bundle. Then it's better to make it feel very similar.
This is key, right? The bundle part, because if I'm thinking about like Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, and so on, they all have the same feeling wise, right? Like, and it also is kind of like a kickstart for existing users to get familiar with the other app in a way. But I think the bundle part there,
it's very important. If it's in part of a bundle, it should feel very similar.
Yeah, otherwise they can have their own, or maybe should have their own identity in a way.
Especially I think it's very important to make that decision on style choices. If it's an app that is part of another app, then just copy UI codes or make that Swift package if that's your thing.
Yeah, that's my thing. All right, that was super interesting. I actually planned to really ask you specific questions, but this whole process kind of like smoothly transitioned into a lot of like key elements of what defines a good design. So that's super great. I think we also inspired a lot of designers. Like, don't be afraid to start coding.
You can do it. It's easy. You get it.
Very good. What if you look now at your indie journey? What are the biggest challenges that you might not have foreseen?
I think what I found that the biggest challenge personally actually is coworkers, lack of coworkers, and I solved that by doing every now and then client work, and now I do 2 projects together with a friend of mine, and I also share an office with Jordi and another friend of mine, so I solved it that way. But I found it at some point, especially when it was all a bit more work from home, at some point you feel like, oh shit, I've been building on my app for 5 days, and the only person I've seen or talked about it with it is my, I don't know, my girlfriend, whatever.
Yeah.
And she doesn't even understand what I'm saying. So it's like, it's nice to have at least have people around you that you can bounce back and forth ideas with. Like we have that the famous iMessage group. But I think it's important to find some people around you that you feel comfortable with, to share early things with, and not to be scared to share with, or even build in public. But at least get some people around you. I think build in public is nice, but it's not personal, right? So it is better to have 1 or 2 friends that they're also in the same field, that understand your projects and understand your problems, and just bounce back and forth ideas with that. than try to do everything by yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
They inspire you. They make you accountable,
Yeah.
maybe as well,
Yeah.
and you can bounce back ideas. But you also feel less lonely, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I think it helps. So I think that was certainly one of the biggest challenges. Other than that, my indie life is very much I only do things that I really like doing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I hope for the best. Really, I think you are very well structured business wise, and I'm very much. Maybe that's also still the designer in me.
yeah,
I still like to explore new things. I
Yeah.
really love to explore new ideas, new concepts, and then see where it goes, and
Yeah.
just ship it and see where it goes. But also not be afraid to kill it or sell it or whatever. Just don't hold on too much. I just want to have fun and in whatever I do.
yeah. And that's maybe also the power behind your indie journey, right? Like you're also not stuck to just work on your own apps. You can still, or you still do client work if you like, right? Like,
Yeah,
you,
do the things you love in a way.
yeah,
actually.
yeah, and I think it's super interesting as well. What you did is like joining forces with another indie where you build together, which still brings back a bit the work
Yeah.
that you did before.
Yeah,
rather
but
than,
with more freedom.
yeah, and I think you shouldn't underestimate the power it brings when you work together with somebody. The motivation, the accountability, the inspiration, the milestones that you get to achieve together, but the milestones are probably also much bigger because you get to work much faster, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's a super powerful way where you're still working on something that you like, you're still independent, but you don't do it alone, right? Like that's a super fascinating idea, and I think many that want to go indie have the opportunity.
Yeah, I think just don't try to do everything yourself always.
No, yeah,
you can't.
exactly.
There's so much to do.
Yeah.
And if it's nicer to do it with a friend, then why not? And also dare to dream big sometimes. Just reach out to people if you want to, like maybe try to do a partnership or something.
Yeah.
Just try it. If you don't try it, then you will never get it. And
No.
you know the fun thing, if you try it now and they think you're too small still, you can try again in 2 years. They would not know that you tried 2 years ago.
and really practical, right? Like I'm also working together with two friends now, and one thing that we found struggling is dividing revenue or income, right? Like you, especially when you're friends and you know each other already, you kind of like want to say immediately like, well, we just do 50-50, but maybe, I mean, you are indie, maybe the person that you want to work with only has 8 hours a week.
Yeah.
So that skews, right? Like how did you challenge that? How did you handle that?
Well, I work with Paul at 2 projects. That's the only 2 projects I work with him. But the one project I've made myself already for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I split it a bit more towards my side because
Yeah.
it's only fair because I already invested so much time, and it was also 100% my thing, and he just joined because he loves the idea. And with Helm, for example, we just do 50-50 because we were both there from the start. So we just both do it. He spends also a lot of time in, but he just spends it in his own hours.
Yeah.
And he spends it on the things that I really don't want to do.
Right, all right.
So for me, that's worth that 50% as well, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I think it is indeed a tough one, and I don't think I've been lucky to work with a good friend like Paul so it was easy for me. But I think it's always a bit of a business idea, like what's fair in this case.
Yeah. Yeah, because if Paul now starts to work much more on it, because there's more technical challenges rather than design challenges or something like that. I'm thinking
it's
out
all
loud.
balances out.
Maybe I'm inspiring Paul now to start the discussion again. But no, but I get that, and it needs to feel good. And did you write something down together with him or something?
No, it's all in good terms. Just
all in good terms.
Yeah, we didn't lawyer up or anything.
It's maybe also the question, right? Like if you have to do that.
Yeah.
Do you really want to work together with?
Exactly. You should trust each other. I mean, we're really good friends as well. So we want this friendship to. If it gets too serious, we probably will. But we hope it never gets that serious. Honestly,
it's almost like a relationship. Isn't
it
it
is in a way. Yeah. It's. I mean.
No, we will never divorce. We don't have to write things down.
At what point do you get married? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah. The contract is
the contract is the marriage.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is a great way to to end this episode. It was super fun.
Thanks
a
for having
lot
me.
for your design inspiration.
Thanks.
I need to look up that golden rule.
Yeah, I'll share it.
Yeah, please do. And I'll
Link in the show notes.
Link in the show notes. There you go. For people to find you, where do they find you?
On Twitter, I'm at Hidde Ploeg. Yeah, it's also in the show notes, I hope. And on Mastodon, I'm at Hidde on the mastodon.design one. But you can also just find me on modemhq.com, I guess. That's officially my company's name. So
all right.
You'll find my apps there. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for all the inspiration. And
thanks for having me. Thank you.